experience. And I set up New York, and they all just took turns trying to hit the buildings, and they couldn't do it unless they slowed down to almost landing speeds.
Wow,
they could do it.
I didn't know that. Tell me about that.
That's incredible.
Yeah, and they could not hit those buildings. At the high speeds, they couldn't do it.
Yeah, well, I guess they were getting into all kinds of Dutch roll and everything then, right?
Well, that's right. That's exactly what was happening.
Things to remember about the Dutch roll. Firstly, there is a damping ratio, which is how quickly the motion dies down. There's a frequency, which is the speed of the motion itself. And there's the roll-to-yaw ratio, which is a measure of how much roll, how much bank angle to how much side slip. And those are the three aspects that you have to assess. And they're all important in their own way.
There were Dutch roll problems. People don't realize that to hand fly an airliner at those speeds is extremely difficult. It's very hard to hand fly an airplane at those speeds, and particularly if you're a novice, because a novice that's learned and all of their experience is on little airplanes, they over control everything. But you got to understand, going 300 knots in an airliner, and you move the controls like you would expect to do in a little airplane.
Right.
Well, I mean, you couldn't stand the G-forces. Everything has to be just fingertip control. So basically, out of the 10 times each guy did it, nobody could do it. I finally was able to do it on probably the last time. I jumped up there and tried it, and but I'm telling you that kind of opened their eyes, and I said, something is not right. We were finding that all the time. Even these airline pilots that have thousands and thousands of hours of experience had a hard time controlling an airplane at those speeds. So,
I'll tell you, even when I was making the film, and I was doing all those different maneuvers to set it up to hit the Pentagon, how you see all coming in from the top, coming in from the side, coming in from the other side, going into where Rummy was sitting on the other side of the building, and then I tried to line it up exactly how the official story states. It took me about 5 or 6 tries, even in Microsoft Flight Simulator, to get it down just right.
Landing speeds are about 5 times less than the speeds reported on 9/11 at the World Trade Center. The interviewed pilots were able to impact the World Trade Center as done on 9/11 on first attempt at landing speed. It's a whole different animal when attempting to do the same thing at more than 150 knots over maximum operating speed for the type aircraft. The slightest pressure doesn't even have to be an actual movement on the steering wheel or what we call yoke will produce very large changes in aircraft direction or even structural failure. The government wants us to believe these hijacker pilots whose best pilot couldn't control a 172 at 65 knots had trouble landing it, and then they got 3 aircraft completely inside an object with margins for error that didn't exceed 33 feet in the case of the Pentagon or 25 feet in the case of the World Trade Center at over 400 to 500 knots. You decide.
And you were talking about how hard it is, even at landing speeds, to hit a small target. So talk a little bit about that. What you were saying with, I guess, an aircraft carrier?
Yeah, we had a program in our simulator, one of the simulators at United, that some WizKit had put in, where you could technically take a 757, take it over to San Diego, and try to land on an aircraft carrier, and just for fun. This obviously was not a part of training curriculum. And
now, were you flying the 7.5 in the sim or the 7.6 at that time?
This was a 757.
Okay.
Which, as you know, much smaller than a 767. But we were both qualified on both aircraft, 767 and 757.
Would you say that the 7.6 or the 7.5 is more maneuverable?
7.5 is more maneuverable, obviously.
Okay.
Especially at light weights.
So tell us about your experience in trying to hit this aircraft carrier.
We had just finished our PCE, me and the co-pilot.
And PC, for those out there, is
our 6 months proficiency check at that time. And I think we did a good job. And the check airman, we had a little bit of time left, and he kind of wanted to reward us. He said, "Would you like to go land on an aircraft carrier?" And we took the airplane over to San Diego, and we tried to do some touch and goes on this aircraft carrier, which was pretty fun for us. First time the first officer tried, I think he made about 4 approaches, try to land that thing on the aircraft carrier. And mind you, this was a very light aircraft. In other words, nowhere in heavy weights. So our approach speeds were pretty low. I want to say around 120 knots or so, which is quite low. The lower airspeed, the better and easier to obviously handle and maneuver it.
Yeah, sure. You're basically going behind the power curve to, doing a short field landing in a 7.5.
Yeah. And obviously, our aircraft did not have a tail hook, and so we weren't trying to catch any wires or anything like that. We were just trying to make it on the deck of this aircraft carrier. There was no wind situation. It was basically a perfect condition, almost unrealistically perfect. And anyway, when it was my turn, it was probably the hardest thing I've ever done, trying to land this big airplane on an aircraft carrier.
Right.
I think my first try, I sheared the gear off the airplane because I hit the side of the carrier. And then my second approach, I managed to do it. But
and let's reiterate that these are at landing speeds for a short field landing.
Exactly. Landing speed in perfect condition, no wind, and it was the hardest thing that I've ever done. And obviously, I mashed it in there on the runway. It was a real arrival. I wasn't looking for a smooth landing or anything like that. Just trying to get it in there.
Now let me ask you a question, Rusty. Being a 767 captain, with the amount of time that you have, what, 30,000 hours?
At that time, yeah.
With United Airlines, if you were in a 767, which you say that is less maneuverable than a 757, could you get such an airplane with a 156-foot wingspan into a 208-foot target without having any time in the type aircraft?
I don't think so. And as you were saying, 510 knots according to NTSB or
that's right.
That's what?
Supersonic speeds.
Yeah.
And just mid-level altitudes. Now,
to me, with those kinds of numbers, I think it's impossible.
We already know that based on EgyptAir 990 as precedent that not only does a 767 not have the capability of such speeds, but according to EgyptAir 990, such speeds also cause structural failure. But let's explore the hypothetical that an unmodified 767 can obtain such speeds intact. Again, there is a reason the manufacturer set speed limitations. These factors include flutter, as we have seen, but other factors include control surface effectiveness, center of pressure versus center of gravity, trim characteristics, to just name a few. When aircraft exceed their design limits, control effectiveness becomes increasingly non-existent. For example, as airspeed increases, the wing generates more lift. Therefore, the pilot needs to push the nose down. Trim is used to relieve these pressures. There comes a point when the airspeed is so great that the throw, on the elevator and trim are at their limits and no longer can keep the nose down, and the aircraft is now said to be out of control. The elevator and trim only move so much.